A millionaire stumbles upon an abandoned mansion and discovers two children who have been hiding in the shadows for weeks. But as he tries to help, he uncovers a deadly conspiracy, a missing mother, and a secret powerful enough to bring down a pharmaceutical empire. Is he willing to risk everything to protect them? The early morning sunlight streamed through the pristine glass windows of the 54th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. From his marble-floored penthouse office, Nathan Cole, one of the most powerful names in New York's real estate world, stood silently, holding a cup of unsweetened black coffee, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the city awoke in shimmering golden light. He had just closed a massive deal, a midtown office complex worth nearly $400 million. But for Nathan, victory was never enough. He was the kind of man who, the moment he reached one peak, already had his eyes set on the next. In the quiet room, filled only with the soft hum of the air conditioner and the rustle of blueprints being flipped, his phone suddenly rang. "Nathan, you've got to see this." The voice of Michael. Grant, the seasoned property scout and Nathan's closest friend, crackled with excitement. "A 19th-century mansion in the Hudson Valley just hit the market. I'm not kidding. It's like something out of a Gothic dream. It feels like it's been waiting for someone to find it." Nathan frowned, a slight smirk tugging at his lips. "An abandoned mansion? Sounds like the set of a horror movie. Trust me, it's unlike anything you've ever seen. Solid stone columns, handcrafted stained glass windows, a garden left wild for 2 decades. The old owner passed away, and the heirs are desperate to offload it. I think it's calling your name." Nathan chuckled softly, but something in Michael's tone stopped him from hanging up, as he usually would. A strange restlessness crept into his mind, as if an invisible hand were pulling back the curtain of time, revealing something untold. "Send me the pictures." Now, less than 3 minutes later, Nathan's inbox pinged, and he froze. In the photos, bathed in the dim light of late afternoon, the mansion loomed like a beautiful phantom, an ivy-covered attic, a sagging, dark-tiled roof, shattered windows with jagged remnants of glass reflecting a deep purple sunset. Yet beneath the decay lay an indescribable grandeur, like a forgotten castle stranded in the 21st century, and there was something in one small attic window, as if someone was standing there looking out. A faint, slender shadow, its form unclear. Nathan's brow furrowed. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in his instincts, and his instincts were screaming. "I want to see it today," he said. "Call the car, and Michael, don't say a word to the press. This house, there's something about it." The sleek black SUV sped out of the city as the morning sun still lingered. Manhattan shrank behind them like a canvas dusted with gold. Ahead of Nathan lay winding roads stretching north, toward autumn forests that whispered secrets known only to the wind and time. He leaned back against the leather seat, the coffee in his hand now cold, but his eyes burned with a fire that never faded, fixed on something he couldn't yet name, something waiting for him in that silent house where time stood still and secrets hid within every cold brick. The SUV rolled slowly through the rusted iron gate, creaking with a sound like a whisper from another era. Nathan stepped out, his long coat swaying lightly in the cold Hudson Valley breeze. Before him stood a colossal structure, bearing the air of a soul asleep beneath moss and memories. The tiled roof sagged as if collapsing layer by layer. The windows were boarded up with old planks, some of which had fallen away, revealing dark, shadowy voids. Ivy climbed all the way to the attic, draping over the rusted railings like withered arms reaching out from the gloom. Nathan stood still. He couldn't explain why his heart was pounding so fiercely. A house was just wood, stone, and wind, yet it carried a mysterious pulse that made him feel as though this place had been waiting for him for a very long time. Michael approached from behind, holding out a set of rusty keys. "Ready to time travel yet?" Nathan didn't reply. His eyes were locked on a small attic window, where, he was certain, something had just moved. Whether it was a figure or merely a fragment of shadow breaking apart, he couldn't tell. Inside the house, dust hung so thick that even the light seemed murky. Each step on the wooden floor elicited a groan of protest, but the scene took Nathan's breath away. Crumbling ceilings still bore traces of classical patterns. Shattered crystal chandeliers lay scattered, glinting like broken ice. They passed through a long hallway, its walls covered in faded wallpaper and cracked mirrors that reflected distorted figures. The main staircase to the second floor was rotting but stood firm, like an old man refusing to fall. "Hear that?" Nathan whispered. A thud echoed from upstairs, short, sharp, and sudden. Both men froze. "Could be the wind," Michael said, though his eyes betrayed his wariness. "Or maybe not," Nathan replied, stepping toward the stairs. The wooden steps creaked under his weight. Light from the cracked windows cast pale patches on the walls, like the hands of spirits crawling through the space. The second floor was empty, but Nathan spotted a door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar. His heart tightened. It led to the attic. He said nothing. He simply pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and pushed the door open. Dust swirled so thickly it swallowed the light. The air here was colder, heavier. The space was cluttered with wooden chests, suitcases, and white sheets draped over old furniture. The room wasn't exactly dead. It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. And then he saw it. Footprints. Small, fresh, very fresh. The dust around them was disturbed. Something, or someone, had passed through here recently. Nathan crouched down. Nearby was a crumpled food wrapper, an old blanket, and a child's flashlight. "Hello?" he called. His voice dissolved into the room like breath in the cold. No answer came, but in a far corner, behind a thick curtain draped over a bookshelf, something shifted. Nathan stepped closer. Gently, he lifted the curtain. A little girl, no older than 10, huddled in the corner, clutching an old bundle of cloth tightly. Her wide, frightened eyes gleamed in the darkness, and the bundle in her arms? It moved slightly. A faint cry broke the silence. Nathan felt his throat tighten. It was a newborn baby. The girl was holding an infant, and trembling from fear and cold. What's your name?" he asked softly, kneeling down to her level. She hesitated. "Lily." "And who's this?" "My little brother. His name's Eli." Nathan swallowed hard. "Where are your parents?" Lily looked down, her eyes welling with tears. "Mom said she'd come back. It's been 2 weeks." In that moment, the world around Nathan seemed to blur. No more mansion, no more deals, just 2 children forgotten, abandoned, staring at him like he was the only person left in their world. He reached out his hand, ever so gently. "You don't have to stay here anymore. I'll take you and Eli somewhere safe, okay?" Lily hesitated, then very slowly her small hand rested in his, and from that moment, Nathan Cole was no longer just a millionaire. He was the only person these 2 children could trust. The old iron gate of the mansion let out a low, grating creak as the SUV pulled away from the entrance. Nathan didn't look back. He knew that if he did, he wouldn't just see a crumbling house. He'd see a promise he'd just made, one that was now seeping into his heart in a way he hadn't expected. In the back seat, Lily sat silently, clutching Eli, who was dozing in her small arms. She wore a tattered old sweater, her hair a mess, her eyes still fixed on the dark house they'd left behind, as if a part of her hadn't fully departed. Nathan glanced at her in the rearview mirror. That look, a child accustomed to waiting, to hunger, to fear, tightened his throat. He opened the glove compartment, pulling out a protein bar and a bottle of water. "I don't have anything tastier right now," he said softly, turning around. "But we'll stop soon and get something warm, okay?" Lily nodded faintly but didn't eat right away. Instead, she carefully adjusted the blanket around Eli, fixed his little knit cap, and only then broke the bar into small pieces to eat slowly. Nathan watched her every move, delicate, quiet, as if she'd been a mother for far longer than her years. The wind outside was biting, the dark autumn forests sliding past the windows. Inside the car, the silence wasn't cold. It was a fragile space between a man who'd once had everything and two children who'd lost it all, tentatively reaching for the first threads of trust. As they passed through Albany, Nathan pulled into a small 24-hour diner off the road. The flickering neon sign seemed to breathe faintly, and inside only a handful of truck drivers ate hurriedly. He opened the car door, walked around to the back and leaned down. "We'll sit in the corner. It's warm in there and no one will bother you." Lily nodded, still not letting go of Eli for a moment. She stepped into the diner like a stray cat entering a living room, wary, cautious, but clinging to the most precious thing in her hands. They took a secluded table. A middle-aged waitress approached, her eyes widening briefly at the sight of Lily and the baby. Nathan caught her gaze and gave a subtle shake of his head. No words, but enough to say, "Don't ask." He ordered eggs, pancakes, and hot milk. When the food arrived, Lily didn't dig in right away. She checked on Eli again, tucked his blanket tighter, and only then began, eating slowly, as if every motion had to ensure her brother wasn't forgotten for even a second. Nathan watched without a word. He'd signed deals worth hundreds of millions, met countless people at lavish parties, but no one had ever silenced him for so long. When the meal was over, Nathan stepped outside to make a call. The wind lashed his face, but he didn't feel the cold. "Sarah," he said into the phone, "I need you to prep the guest room at the penthouse now. Clean it up, get a crib, blankets, snacks, and have someone buy everything a newborn needs. Diapers, formula, bottles, soft towels, clothes. You've got half an hour." "2 people?" Sarah asked. "No, 3. His voice softened. "And Sarah, no questions. Just do it for me." Night had fallen by the time they returned to Manhattan. The towering buildings glowed, their lights reflecting faintly on the car windows. In the back seat, Lily had dozed off, her head resting against the glass. Eli nestled in her arms. Nathan slowed down, almost afraid to wake them. He'd never driven so carefully in his life. When the car stopped at his building, Sarah was waiting with the private elevator key in hand. She glanced at the children, momentarily stunned, but true to her word, she didn't ask a thing. "The room's ready. Baby supplies will be here in 15 minutes. Nathan nodded. The elevator doors closed, carrying them to the top of the city, and perhaps to a new beginning for all 3. The penthouse was warm and quiet. The golden light from the lamps bathed the ceiling, creating a peaceful haven far removed from the dark attic they'd left behind. Nathan opened the door to a small room, where a pristine white crib stood in the center, the air tinged with the faint scent of soothing essential oils. "This is your room. There are new clothes and towels ready. You can shower, then rest. It's safe here, I promise." Lily looked at him, still holding Eli close. But then, like a weary bird folding its wings, she gave a small nod. "Thank you." When the door closed behind her, Nathan stood still for a long moment. Alone in the soft glow of the lights, he realized for the first time in years he might not be alone anymore. The rain tapped rhythmically against the penthouse's glass windows. Nathan sat silently in his office, a long cold cup of coffee resting untouched. On his desk was a photo he'd just taken with his phone, Lily cradling Eli, feeding him from a bottle. Under the golden lamplight, her face emerged like a portrait that pierced straight to the soul. Resilient, small, and weary, in a way no child should ever be. He rested his hand on his forehead, his heart heavy. A single question echoed in his mind like a relentless bell. Where had that mother been for the past 2 weeks? The door swung open. Sarah stepped in, holding a thin folder, her expression as still as the wind before a storm. "I found something," she said quietly. Nathan looked up, his gaze sharp with anticipation. "Lily's mother is Claire Dawson. She was an investigative reporter for New Light Journal. A month ago she vanished. No note, no trace. Reported missing 3 weeks back." Nathan's brow furrowed. "Investigative reporter?" Sarah nodded. "Her last case was on a pharmaceutical giant, Pharmacore. tied to a children's drug linked to severe side effects. Days before she disappeared, she hacked into their internal system, pulling out a stash of confidential documents and unreleased medical records. Nathan felt a chill crawl over his skin. She touched something no one dares to touch. Sarah slid a printed page toward him. An internal investigation file, a spreadsheet listing hundreds of severe adverse reactions in children, hastily edited notes, and a signature at the bottom. Trevor Black, current CEO of Pharmacore. Claire emailed a friend saying if anything happened to her, the truth is in Eli's blanket. Could be a metaphor, or maybe not. Nathan froze. A jolt shot down his spine. He stood abruptly, left the room, and headed straight to Lily's bedroom. She was asleep, clutching Eli close like a kitten with a stuffed bear. Her smudged face still carried traces of fear even in sleep. Nathan approached quietly, gently inspecting the blanket, and then, inside the lining, he found a rough, clumsy seam. His hands trembled as he pulled out a small object, a silver USB, sewn tightly into the fabric near the edge. God, he breathed. Back in his office, Nathan plugged the USB into his laptop. A flood of files appeared: victim interview videos, internal spreadsheets, photos of email exchanges between Pharmacore executives, and most chillingly, an audio recording of a man's threatening voice. If you keep going, Claire, you'll disappear. No one will find you, and your 2 kids won't have anyone left to call Mom. Nathan yanked out his earbuds, his palms ice cold. He leaned back in his chair, his usually steady gaze faltering. A horrific story was unfolding. A mother on the run to protect the truth and her children. When he returned to the living room, Lily was sitting on the sofa, wrapped in a thick blanket. The dim light softened her tangled hair. She turned to him, her voice a faint whisper. "Have you found my mom yet?" Nathan knelt in front of her, holding her gaze with unwavering depth. "Not yet, but I promise I'm trying my hardest. And I believe your mom loves you so much, she left you there because she knew you'd be strong, because she had no other choice." Lily lowered her eyes. A tear fell onto the blanket's edge, then silently dissolved. "Mom said, if anyone came, I had to hide. Stay quiet, protect Eli, because, she said, Eli has something really important." She looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. "I don't know what it is, but I didn't let anyone take him." Nathan's voice caught in his throat. He didn't know what to say beyond a whisper. "You've done better than anyone could." As the night sank into stillness, Nathan stood by the window, staring at the glowing city in the distance. Its light couldn't reach wherever Claire was hiding, but now he knew, every second she remained missing, these 2 children were still in danger. And he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't let them face it alone again. The city at night glimmered like an ocean of light, but on the highest floor of Nathan's building, everything was steeped in silence. The penthouse held only the faint breathing of 2 sleeping children and the steady ticking of a clock, counting down the seconds of waiting. Nathan sat on the sofa, still in the suit he'd worn since morning, his eyes fixed on the late-night news flickering across the TV screen. But no one in the room was truly listening. Everything now was just a pause, a stillness before the final storm. Beside him, Lily sat quietly, holding Eli tightly, as if she were the last barrier protecting his fragile life. Her eyes were dry, but exhaustion and longing shone through in every slow, weary blink. "Do you think my mom will come back?" Lily asked, her voice barely more than a breath. Nathan didn't answer right away. He looked at her, then out into the void beyond the glass. "I think if she's a mother like yours, she'll come back, no matter what it takes." Lily nodded faintly, wanting to believe, but her heart bore too many scars to trust fully. Then the doorbell rang. The sound struck like lightning in the quiet. Nathan shot to his feet. No one but Sarah knew the code to his private elevator. His heart raced. He rushed to the security monitor. A woman. standing there drenched in rain, her face pale, hair plastered to her skin, eyes wild with panic yet burning with an unquenchable spark, the spark of a mother who'd clawed her way back from hell. "Claire," Nathan whispered. He ran to open the door. She stumbled in as if swept by the storm behind her. "Where are my children?" Her voice cracked on the verge of breaking. "Safe," Nathan said quickly. "They're here." Claire didn't hear anything else. She collapsed, her soaked, heavy backpack sliding off her shoulder. Her body trembled from cold, fear, and an emotion about to burst free. From the hallway, Lily appeared. She stood still, her oversized pajamas hanging loosely, hair disheveled, Eli sleeping peacefully in her tiny arms. Claire looked up. Their eyes met. 1 second, then 2. The world stopped. "Mom?" Lily's voice shattered like glass. Claire moved toward her, legs trembling. "Lily." The little girl stood frozen, as if unable to believe the figure before her was real. But then, like a door flung open after days of being locked shut, Lily ran, her small feet pounding across the hallway as if afraid that slowing down would make her mother vanish. Claire dropped to her knees just as Lily crashed into her arms. I waited like you said. I didn't leave. I did what you told me." Lily sobbed, each word a flood of pent-up days spilling out in a single breath. I know. I'm sorry." "I'm here now." Claire wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her as if letting go would mean losing everything again. Their cries echoed through the penthouse. Not cries of anguish, but of reunion after too much loss. Nathan stood motionless, his eyes locked on the scene before him. He'd witnessed countless deals, dazzling opening ceremonies bathed in light, but never a moment that pierced his heart with both pain and radiance like this. Later, when the storm settled, Claire sat on the sofa, wrapped in a large towel. A bowl of hot soup, brought by Sarah, steamed on the table. Lily pressed close to her mother, her hand never leaving Claire's. Nathan looked at Claire, his eyes full of questions, and she began to speak, her voice shaky, her gaze distant, each word cutting through the darkness like a blade. She spoke of being hunted, of uncovering Pharmacore's internal documents, hidden statistics, lives discarded. She told them how she'd sewn the USB into Eli's blanket, knowing no one would suspect a newborn carried the truth. And finally, she recounted the moment she'd had to choose, fleeing alone to shield her children from the fallout. "I didn't know where was safe anymore." Claire looked at Nathan. "But when I saw your name on the mansion's renovation permit, I knew I had to risk coming back." Nathan said nothing. He glanced at Lily, then at Claire, and for the first time he felt he wasn't just a rescuer. He was part of this story, part of them. That night, when everyone had fallen asleep, Nathan stood alone on the balcony. The rain had stopped, and the city sparkled like an unspoken promise. This story wasn't over, but tonight, at least, a mother had returned, and a small family had found each other again in a world far too vast. A week after the reunion, Nathan walked into his office as usual, but instead of opening blueprints or dialing investors, he sat down and powered up his laptop. On the screen were the classified files Claire had risked everything to obtain. Despite his cool exterior, each line of data and every recorded voice tightened his grip, minute by minute. Evidence of unregulated drug trials, falsified reports, and the lives of hundreds of children endangered just to prop up stock prices. The name Trevor Black, CEO of Pharmacore, slithered through every document like a snake. He made a call. "Mike, I need you, and get Alex Chambers, ex-FBI, on board." This was no longer just about 2 children or a courageous mother. It was a battle against a force massive enough to bury any voice unless someone was reckless enough or heartbroken enough to risk it all. 3 days later, Nathan walked out of the Department of Justice with Claire by his side. The press hadn't caught wind yet, but the people who needed to know already did. "They won't let this go easily," Claire said, her journalist's sharp gaze still alight, though her voice trembled slightly. Nathan met her eyes, his tone unwavering. can buy silence, but they can't buy the truth, and this time the truth has allies. Within hours, a breaking news alert flashed across every major TV channel. National medical scandal: Pharmacore CEO accused of concealing severe side effects of infant drug. The whistleblower, former journalist Claire Dawson, vanished for 3 weeks with her 2 young children, carrying secret evidence she hid in her baby's blanket to escape. Trevor Black was arrested mid-shareholder meeting that morning. Cameras captured his ashen face and frantic eyes as he was handcuffed and led out of the building, swarmed by dozens of reporters. "Any words, Trevor?" I don't know anything about this. Did you order the records falsified?" "I need to speak to my lawyer." Nathan watched the broadcast from his office. Beside him, Claire sat on the sofa, clutching the remote. There was no triumphant smile, just a quiet exhale, light yet laden with exhaustion. Days later, the case ballooned into a full federal investigation. The Department of Justice ordered a comprehensive review of every Pharmacore pediatric drug from the past decade. Trevor Black faced 17 charges, including commercial fraud, public endangerment, and obstruction of justice. Claire, after submitting all her evidence, was placed under special protection as a key witness. She declined every interview request. When reporters mobbed the base of the building, Nathan offered only one response: "She doesn't need to be a hero, she just wants to be a mom." That evening, in the peaceful penthouse, Lily sat by the window, Eli asleep in Claire's lap. Claire looked at Nathan, her eyes softened after weeks of storms. "If you hadn't stepped into that house, if you hadn't found them," Nathan gave a faint smile, "if you hadn't been brave enough to hide an entire truth in the arms of a child, I wouldn't have anything to find." Claire fell silent, a silence full of gratitude. That night, the 3 of them, along with the 2 children, slept soundly for the first time in weeks of turmoil. Justice never comes early, but when it arrives, it brings a light strong enough to dispel even the deepest shadows. That morning, the sky was crystal clear after the first rain of the season. Soft sunlight spread like silk across the grass of the city's Central Park. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the peaceful air, a symphony of life washed clean of the dust of the past. Lily was running on the lawn, her pale green dress fluttering in the breeze, her loosely tied hair swaying behind her. Nathan sat on a wooden bench watching her, with Claire beside him, her arms cradling Eli, who slept soundly in a soft wrap. "She's smiling more now," Nathan said quietly. Claire nodded, her gaze fixed on her daughter. "She's still afraid of the shadows in her dreams, but during the day she's starting to believe that the light will stay." A gentle silence passed between them. "Will you leave?" Claire asked, her eyes drifting toward Lily in the distance. Nathan didn't answer immediately. He turned to look at the woman beside him, the one who'd risked her life for the truth, for her children, for a different future. Then he glanced down at his hands that had once held hundreds of contracts, now feeling empty without something truly meaningful to hold on to. "No, unless you want me to," Nathan replied, his voice low. Claire turned to him, her expression softening. "I don't—" In the distance, Lily stopped, then ran back toward them. Her face glowed, a wild yellow flower clutched in her hand. She pressed it into Nathan's palm. "You have to keep it so you'll remember today." "What's today?" Nathan asked, smiling. "The day I officially choose you." He paused, then laughed, though his eyes stung with emotion. "Then I choose you too." That evening, in the penthouse that had now become a home, soft laughter filled rooms once silent. There was no wedding, no adoption papers, no grand proclamation. There was only one certainty. This was a family, found amid ruins, bound by love and chosen by the very people within it. And the most miraculous thing was this: they didn't need blood to call each other home.